This new sermon series we're going to embark upon is going to revolve around miracles. And when I mention the word miracle, sometimes we're met with extreme skepticism. You hear people and they're kind of out there. It's like, I was walking through the grocery store and my favorite peanut butter was there, and it's a miracle, and they're dancing down the aisles, when they find, something in the grocery store or whatnot, and we look and we roll our eyes and we think, okay, what's up with this nutcase? And then this happens. You'll meet people, you'll come across people, and every time they look under a bush or rock, there's another miracle occurring. And after a while, you're like, how many miracles did you have on Tuesday? It gets a little bit absurd. And then there's these other moments on the other side of the spectrum where we're like, oh my, this is the real deal. When I was in high school, my freshman year in high school, I had a friend of mine. He was in a motorcycle accident. He had been riding his dirt bike. He didn't have a helmet on. He hit a tree or something. He went flying off the motorcycle. He hit his head on a rock. Just his skull came crashing right down on the stone. He was in a coma for 6 weeks and had been in this coma. People were praying for him. And when he came out of the coma, he had only a little diminishment in ability. 97% of his faculties returned. The only two things that he had any struggle with was he was a little slow to speak. He had a hard time getting some of his words out, and his steps, his ability to ambulate was struggled. But other than that, everything was normal with this guy. The doctors literally wrote on his medical report, miracle. Because 6 weeks in a coma after that type of a head trauma, you don't come out. And they were stunned. He went through report after doctor, and they basically said, this man has experienced a miracle. This doesn't happen. And so when we talk about the topic of miracles, it's all over the map. And it's a major theme in the Bible. From the beginning to the end, we see miracles cropping up. And it's a theme and it's a motif that I'd like to build upon. And as a way of an introduction, I wanted to start with a simple definition of what exactly is a miracle. And Louis Sperry Chafer, a theologian, once wrote this: a miracle, in the strict sense of the word, is some special achievement which is outside of the known laws of either human experience or of nature. So it's something extraordinary that may occur. And really, when you get down to it, miracles occur really on two different levels. One is within the natural realm, and one is in the supernatural realm. Both are orchestrations and acts of God. But in the natural realm, you'd see something being orchestrated in terms of I'll use the story of Esther, where there isn't some sort of a supernatural event taking place, but all the events are being orchestrated by the hand of God. And you can't help but wonder, wow, these doors are opening and closing and things are happening in the storyline, and it's revealing the presence of God. And that would be a type of a miracle. Of course, you have the supernatural type whereby, like Lazarus being raised from the dead. These things don't happen ever unless God is moving. But both are miracles. They're just on different types and styles and spectrums. The purpose of a miracle, and theologian R.C. Trench offers something here. They're not just the end to themselves. I've heard people say, well, God just works miracles for the sake of working miracles. No, there's greater purpose. And Trench explains this quite well. A miracle serves as a sign, an indication of the near presence and working of God. There's more to it than just the act, the healing or the deliverance or the movement that God is making here. There's something designed behind this so that we may learn and grow and understand God and have a closer relationship with Him. So we find here that the miracles are a means to a greater end. Often in the Bible, a miracle will occur to authenticate someone's ministry. And we find that happens throughout the course of Jesus especially. Going back to John's Gospel, when Lonnie was reading a few moments ago, notice how Nicodemus responds to Jesus. I'll read it through you one more time. I have the words up here. Now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. And what does it say in the next verse? This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you have what? Come from God. Okay? Why does he know this? Because no one can do the signs that you do unless God was with him. You see how the confirmation occurs, the authentication of Jesus in the eyes of this one Pharisee. who may have been very skeptical for a while that Messiah was coming during his lifetime, now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this is validating things, and it points us to this unique sense of confirmation. We also find that miracles are going to reveal things about God, and this is why we're studying John's Gospel, because John is a master of not only presenting the miracle story, but weaving lessons in and around the story so that you see the full purpose behind the event. It's almost as if you're hearing a sermon and then you're going to watch the sermon in real time as Jesus interfaces with people and works signs and wonders. So it's sort of like a two-tiered lesson plan that's being presented throughout the entire Gospel of John, which leads us to our homework assignment. Yes, a homework assignment. Yes, I'm asking all of you to read John's Gospel this summer. It's not terribly long. I believe it's 20 chapters. But if you really want to get the most out of the sermon series, my recommendation and my request of you is to each day go home and read one chapter a day. One chapter a day. Whenever you do your devotions, just work your way through John's Gospel over the next few weeks, and you'll find that the miracles build upon the teaching and the events and back and forth. It's absolutely phenomenal. So there's your homework for today, or for the rest of at least for a little while. You'll get more, don't worry. In the Old Testament, we find that there are agents of miracles, and then there's just the miracles themselves. An agent of a miracle would be like a Moses or an Elijah or Elisha, whereby these people they're wielding power, incredible power, and things happen. The parting of the sea and the plagues and the water coming out of the rock, etc. So we have, but there's only a few people that do that. There's very few. In fact, most of the characters in the Old Testament, they may experience miracles. They may pray and have something occur. Hezekiah, for an example, he's sick, he's got a boil, he's going to die. Isaiah says, apply a poultice to it. We're praying, and Hezekiah now is delivered from that illness, and he gets another 15 years. That's not being an agent of the miracle, that's being a recipient of the miracle. So we only have a few characters in the Old Testament who are agents. In the New Testament, it's the same way. We only have a couple of people who are agents of miracles, who are wielding this power, tremendous power, and Jesus being the penultimate one. And this is why we're going to explore him. But we have a few apostles that do the same. Peter and Paul wield tremendous power as they're preaching. And that's what? To authenticate and confirm and verify that these are servants of God. And this is where I come into one of my caveats here. I do not believe that the grandiose signs and wonders that we see in the New Testament are occurring today. Do I believe miracles happen? Yes. Do I believe we need to pray? Yes. Do I believe that God answers those prayers? Yes. Do I believe God is confirming things by virtue of answering prayer? Yes. There's a wonderful book written, it's called God the Evidence. It goes way, way back. There's this guy, he starts off, his last name is Glenn, he starts off as an atheist. And by the time he's done with his study, he's a theist. He believes in God. He believes that God answers prayer because there's been so many accounts of people praying and seeking after the Lord and seeing results and changes in their lives that he said the evidence is overwhelming that there is a God out there, and he's personal and he's not silent. He's involved. But the signs that we see that Peter and Paul and Jesus all perform, I believe, have come to a close. And the reason why I say that is that we don't have people going to the hospitals anymore, clearing them out. I would love to see that happen. I think you would love to see that happen. To go to a cancer ward, with a bunch of children who are struggling, and somebody goes in there and just, prays a prayer, and that's it. The kids are all better, and that doesn't happen today. So I think we have to take a step back and realize that the magnitude of what we see in the New Testament in terms of the signs and wonders has diminished because we now have the full revelation of God before us in terms of the Scriptures. The Bible's complete. And we don't need somebody to be authenticated or confirmed any longer as being an author of Scripture, because we have the full revelation that God desired for us to enjoy and learn from. And this is why we find in Peter, Peter says this, 2 Peter seeing that his divine power has granted us what? Everything pertaining to life and godliness through the true knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and excellence. He's given us everything we need to lead a life that'll be honoring to the Lord. And because that revelation is complete, there's no need for someone to be wielding the type of power we see in the early church. So with all that said, we're going to look at the miracles of Christ, and especially the ones in John's Gospel. Now, Jesus worked a ton of miracles. In the Bible, if you were to go through and count them up, there's about 35 different accounts between the Gospels in terms of what Jesus accomplished and did. I believe that number is probably exponentially higher. This is just a sampling of what he had done. Because let's face it, Jesus went into towns and villages and he healed all their diseases, which meant 20, 30, 50 people could have been healed in one fell swoop. And then he went to the next village and did the same. So what we have in the Bible, these 35 miracles, are really just a slice of his ministry that had been recorded by the gospel writers. John only records 8. And that's why one of the reasons why I'm looking at John specifically is because it makes for a perfect summer sermon series. It really does. And so we're going to look at John's 8 miracles. But the reason behind that also is it's not just the shortest list, but it's also one of the most potent lists because John goes across the spectrum of events in Jesus' ministry and explains why these things are all occurring. So that's my long-winded introduction. Let's take a look here. John chapter 2. Verses 1 through 11. The miracle at Cana. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, and both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were 6 stone water pots set there for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 20 or 30 gallons each. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." So they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some out now, and take it to the head waiter." So they took it to him. When the head waiter tasted the water, which had become wine, and did not know where it had come from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the head waiter called the bridegroom and said to him, "Every man serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then he serves the poorer wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This beginning of his signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. And we'll stop right there. What we find here is we open this story, a very common event. It's a wedding, and they have a problem at the wedding. Let's take a look where this is taking shape. So it gives us a little bit of a context here. As we're looking at the map, here we have Jesus is from Nazareth, and which is down here. You can see the little pointer. Cana is like right up the street. It's just a couple miles away. So here's the Sea of Galilee. Jerusalem is down in this neck of the woods. But this is where Jesus, that's his hometown. And right next door is Cana. So this is where the wedding is taking shape. And the weddings in ancient times were a big deal. They still are today. One of the unique things about marriage is that over time, the magnitude and the grandeur of marriage has not diminished. They made a big deal of weddings back then, and we do just the same today. Our traditions have changed, obviously, a bit, but still, it is something that people take very seriously, and it is a major celebration in the lives of people. And that's what's happening here. What would occur prior to this wedding is you had the betrothal, and the engagement period would now start, and the bride and groom would begin to prepare. The groom would learn a trade of whatever his father did. The young man would now learn so he could provide for his family. The woman would now go out and learn about motherhood and taking care of a home, and her mom would teach her about childbearing and things like that. And during that year betrothal, they'd also plan for this wedding feast. And sometimes, if you had the money, it lasted a week. That's a pretty long feast. I'd go to one like that. Mine lasted 4 hours, and I was thinking, man, 7 days, that'll work. So Jack and Meredith, if you guys, if you're thinking a week long, count me in, okay? So, she's like, yeah, 1 day is enough, to plan. But this is, they're planning this thing through, okay, and they're getting everything all set, and so there's an enormous amount of planning that takes shape. There's a guest list that's created. There will be a menu that's going to be orchestrated. It costs quite a bit of money, and if you were going to have a full week-long feast, obviously you needed to have the means to pay for it, including the clothing of the wedding guests. And no one showed up just wearing what you're wearing, and even your Sunday best wasn't enough. You would wear special wedding clothes that the groom would supply. This was all in the groom's lap, and actually the father of the groom paid for this whole thing. So what we're coming to here is this wedding at Cana. It's been planned out, and a lot of scholars believe that Mary was actually part of the planning committee, because she's involved in the interaction with Jesus and the problem that arises, and that is they don't have enough wine. When that problem surfaces, that is a major social faux pas for these folk. Some of us understand what this is like. We've experienced this on a lesser scale at like a potluck or a senior luncheon. Every once in a blue moon, we'll start to run out of food, or we'll think, wait a minute, we don't have enough. And then we scramble and we send somebody down to Vista to get like a sandwich platter or something, because why? There's embarrassment. And they're trying to avoid that. And it seems as if extra people were added to the guest list even at the last minute. Notice here it says this: on the third day, Jesus and some of his disciples were there. Well, his disciples just started following Jesus a couple days earlier. We have the baptism of Jesus, and then the next day we have a series of events where he is gathering a couple of his disciples. He doesn't have all 12 yet, but many scholars believe that Jesus underwent baptism, and it's just a few days later he's at this wedding feast. It may be a couple days into the feast, and so we have extra guests that are now there, present, and they run into this major problem. The problem has really two levels to it. First, it's the embarrassment. I mean, to just run out of something at a wedding is just, that doesn't look good for anybody. But really, what does it say? There's a failure to plan. Because let's face it, many of you have been to weddings, you've held weddings, you've been connected with weddings, and what do? You create your guest list, and let's just say for argument's sake you're going to have 100 people. Well, you sit down and you figure out, well, what do we need for 100 people? That's how you plan, and you work through that. The dessert, the cake size, the meat, all these things are calculated based on what? The number that's given. Now, just a little insight here. When my wife and I planned our wedding, we had 180 people coming to the wedding. 250 showed up at the ceremony. We had people just coming out of the woodwork. It was crazy. They don't come to the reception because we would have been in the same boat, But fortunately, we just had people that wanted to see our wedding ceremony, and a lot more came. But that is where the problem lies. It's in the planning, or the failure to plan. And this is not going to fall necessarily on the groom or even the father of the groom, but it's going to fall on the head of the major domo or the headmaster. If you had the money, you had somebody plan your wedding for you, and they orchestrated all these events. That's that head waiter that you hear about in the storyline. So they have this problem. Is it the end of the world? No. I mean, worse things have happened, okay? To run out of something at a wedding, it's going to happen. You're going to feel like a schmuck, but, everybody's going to wake up and move on in life. Yet, this is how we start the story, with a problem. The solution, Mary is aware of it. Jesus doesn't seem to be aware of it. My theory is he was over at the buffet. He's hanging out and getting a second plate of something good. But Mary brings it to his attention. Now watch what it says here in the passage. It's a very unique interplay between Jesus and Mary. She says, there's no more wine, and then his response is, some people think it's kind of crude, but it's not. He says, the NIV says, dear woman. The NASB says woman. Some other translations, dear lady or lady, it'll be translated. He's not being pejorative here. I want you to understand. He's not trying to be condescending, like, woman, what's it going, this isn't sort of a put down. In Greek and in that culture, to make that reference was actually complimentary. And he'll say the same thing to Mary when he's dying on the cross. John 19:26, he'll say, woman, behold, here is your son, here's your mother, and he entrusts John to taking care of Mary. And again, that same terminology is being used here. In ancient Greek, that term would be actually one of a compliment. It's not to condemn. We often look at it and say, wow, Jesus was pretty rough with his mom. No, he wasn't. But this is the response. The second thing is he's like, why do you involve me? Why am I getting connected with this whole thing? And that seems like a crazy question. You have a problem, and why are you pulling me into this mix? I'm doing other stuff. And it's not that he's not desirous to be involved, but the question really puts us on two different levels of thought. And he asks the question because he is attempting to set the stage for the rest of the event. It's almost like saying, let's say you were at a party, and let's say there was a dentist there. And you go up to the dentist and you say, sir, I've got a problem with my transmission. And the dentist would be like, well, why are you telling me this? Well, you fix things. Why don't you fix this? You see how there's a weird disconnect? The repair of the dentist is in one sphere, and the transmission specialist is in another. And what Jesus is looking to do is really bring the attention to that. There's two things going on here simultaneously. You have a physical problem, you have a social problem, you have a planning problem, but you also are going to see a spiritual matter arising. And that's the point of the question. The next thing he goes on to say here is, my time has not yet come. Huh? It's almost like he puts the whole brakes on the response. And what Jesus introduces here, this is the first time you'll see this phrase, and this is why you need to read the whole Gospel of John. Okay? My homework assignment was not just random, busy work, all right? It's because that phrase is a motif in John's Gospel. That phrase will be repeated over and over and over again by John because Jesus is sensitive to the leading of the Father. There'll be times when they want to make him king. There's going to be times they're going to want to stone him to death and kill him, and and over and over again it says, his time hasn't come, his time hasn't come, his time hasn't come. Why? Why is that there? Because Jesus is submitting to the will of the Father. And he introduces this idea that everything must be done in God's time. So his initial reaction to the problem gives us lots of clues as to what's going to unfold throughout the rest of the miracle. Then he turns around, Mary turns around, and she's shrewd, okay? Mary's a smart mama, okay? Do whatever he says, all right? No tension here now, Jesus. She flips it over into his court, and whatever he says, that's going to happen. What this could be, and in wedding etiquette terms, this could be, if Jesus gets up and leaves, others will leave as well. You know how like you go to a wedding, and when are you supposed to leave a wedding reception? After you cut the cake. That's considered etiquette. You stay at the reception. It can be the most boring thing in the world. You may hate the food. You may not like the people you're sitting by, but you stay until they cut the cake. That's etiquette in the world of wedding planning. Well, if a guest of Jesus' stature leaves, then others may go and spare the embarrassment of the lack of wine. Jesus doesn't leave. What does he do? The solution now is this. He gives some instructions to the servants. I want to bring your attention to what these servants are told to do. He says, fill the jars with water, so they fill them. it tells us here that there's, 6 stone water jars. Now this is a key detail in the text. 6 stone water jars. These are big, 20 to 30 gallons. They must have weighed a ton. You needed a couple of people to move these things around. But they were used for ceremonial washing. Now that tells us something about this entire story. Number one, if you have, and they hold between 20 and 30 gallons. So you're talking, they have 120 to 180 gallons of water for the wedding. Now why would they have that much? It's probably a big wedding. These people may be wealthy. They have a lot of water and they're already emptied. Now, the backstory behind the stone jars is that during the course of any sort of a feast or get-together, people would come and you had ceremonial washing. You had your feet washed when you arrived, you had your hands washed when you arrived, and you went through this ritual. It was part of Jewish custom. But then throughout the course of the whole meal, every time you had a new course, you would wash your hands again twice. So you sat down and you had your salad, and then you would wash your hands up like this, and then you'd wash them down like this, and everybody did it to remain ceremonially clean. You had another meal, another course, you washed your hands again. You ate a little bit more, you washed your hands again. They would wash their hands tons of times. They went through a lot of water. And this is why they have all these stone jugs, and this is why we think it's a big event, and there's quite a few people there. They have this taking shape, and now they're all empty. And Jesus said, go and fill them. He breaks tradition right here. There are some rabbinical studies done in this storyline that says Jesus, in almost all of his miracles, was a gentle rebuke, or sometimes an open rebuke, against the Pharisees. In order for that jug to be used again, it needed to go through a ceremonial cleansing process of submersion and filling and emptying, so that the water in the jug would be ceremonial clean for the washing of the feet, hands, and everything else. They don't do that. Jesus says, go fill these jugs. They fill them up. He says, draw something from it and bring it to the headmaster. It's kind of like saying this, okay? I've got my tea cup here, and I'll put tea in here and I'll put water in here. Imagine somebody saying, well, Dave, can I borrow your mug here for a minute? I got to put some motor oil in it. You'd be thinking to yourself, what are you doing with that? You know, I'm not going to use it again. I mean, you're going to scour this puppy before I'm going to put another cup of tea in here. And this is akin to what's happening here. Jesus is telling them to take these jugs that have been used, no ritual associated, fill them with water, and bring it to the major domo, the headmaster. And of course, the miracle commences. The water is now turned into wine. The headmaster is relieved. His embarrassment has been lifted. His failure has been covered. Jesus has his back and he doesn't even know it. He makes a couple comments. This is good stuff. You save the best to last. And no one knows about this except what? The servants and Jesus, and then ultimately his disciples. One of the key pieces to the storyline is the usage of the word servant. It's said a couple of times in the story. The word here is diakonos. That's where we get the word deacon from. It's a compound word in Greek. Dia meaning from or through, and konos is dust. To translate that word literally would be from dust, from a low point, from a place down by the earth. Who did Jesus reveal his glory to? Those who are close to the dust. Why did he do it this way? It's like everything else in the miracle. He's revealing his work. He's revealing his ministry. He's revealing how he is going to work in God's timing. His identity is now being displayed. His authority, His ability, people are now starting to see. But it's only a select group at first. And this is very intentional. Because the entire miracle story is conveying a picture of how we're to interact with God and how the mission of the Messiah is going to play out in the coming days and weeks and months and years. And what we find here is some very key critical points. Number one is that God is in the business of transformation. Number two, that God works outside of the realm of human tradition. And number three, that those who are humble, those who are lowly, will see the hand of God. So let's bring about some application. How many of us are like the major domo here, and we have made some failures? We have made our plans, we have said some things, we've done some things, and we feel like an embarrassment. I get my foot stuck in my mouth on a daily basis. I'm always looking to get bailed out by Jesus. All of us in this room have struggles. As parents, we struggle, raising our children. As husbands and wives, we struggle in our marriages, saying things we've said, things we've done, things we wish we had done. How many times have we regretted something? Oh, the hand should be going up, but I'm not asking for one, all right? We're all in this boat of feeling embarrassed with our choices. We struggle at work, we struggle at school, we struggle with relationships, even on our best day. You may even want to do something nice for somebody and you end up saying the wrong thing and feeling like a schmuck. All of us do this. And we think to ourselves, Lord Jesus, we need a miracle. Bail us out. Help us to get through this mess we call life. Which means we have to stop for a moment. Because if we're starting to look for a miracle, we're starting to look for the work of God in our lives, we have to stop and recognize that the miracle already began many years ago. When my first child came into this world, I was in the delivery room, and Mary had gone into labor, and it was very quick. Jacob was born in under 5 hours. Her labor and delivery was considered fast, especially for the first child. And I watched this life come into the world. And it was painful, it was beautiful, it was exhausting. He was born at like 4 in the morning on a Sunday, and I'm not a night person. I was ready to pass out. And he's born, and the nurses took him away, and they bring the babies over to a little spot where they clean them up, and they do a lot of testing within moments of birth. And they're doing all these tests, and they're cleaning them up and getting them all swaddled and ready to go, and checking things out to make sure everything is healthy. And there's another nurse who was tending to my wife who was just absolutely wiped out. She had no painkillers. She was all natural. I mean, she is one of the toughest people on the planet. She really is. And she's kind of tired, and the nurse is bringing her some water and trying to help her, just sort of settle down after giving birth. And I'm standing next to the doctor. This woman, she was an OBGYN, and she and I were talking. She was a Christian. And she looks at me and she said, "Do you realize you just watched a miracle?" And I said, I believe, yeah, somehow. And she's like, what happened in the last 20 minutes is truly an act of God. She said, in order for that child to come down the birth canal and into this world, there are dozens and dozens of things that must happen in a woman's body that normally don't happen so that she can give a healthy birth. And they're in sequence. They have to be perfectly timed and have perfect occurrence. And even if one of them doesn't occur, she can die or the child can die. There's dozens of things that are happening physiologically and chemically in her body in order for this to occur. Simultaneously, A whole series of events has to happen in the child's life. Chemically, there's all sorts of little things that are happening during the birthing process. None of that, she said, can be missing from the equation. The timing has to be perfect and the sequence has to be perfect. It could never have possibly evolved. And what you see every time, and she's like, I've delivered hundreds of children. They're all different, but every time a child comes into this world, it is a miracle. Because of all the things that must happen perfectly, simultaneously, in sequence for that birth to occur. Just the final window is an act of God. So when we stop and we ask about a miracle, we need to stop and realize every time you look in the mirror, you are looking at a miracle. The fact that you are alive and in this room today reveals the handprint of God. And in Psalm 139, it tells us that even in the womb, we have been beautifully and wonderfully made. That God knew us, He understood our features, our personalities, everything about us was planned and orchestrated and ordained long before you were even conceived. That's where the miracle starts. The miracle continues at the second birth. The reason why John 3 is such a critical part that we heard from Lonnie being read is that what is Jesus preparing everyone for with this water and the wine business? You go through the next event in the gospel is He clears the temple. People are looking for a sign, and then you have the next piece in the whole story is Nicodemus showing up saying, we know you're from God. And Jesus says, well, you got to be born again. Nicodemus is scratching his head. What's up with this born again business? And Jesus said, flesh gives birth to flesh, but the Spirit will give birth to your spirit. You must not be surprised at saying you need to be born again in order to see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus is puzzled, but then Jesus goes on to explain that this is an event that has to happen. It's a miraculous event. It's a spiritual event. It is something that's paralleling that which you know and have already experienced on the physical side. It has to happen now on the spiritual side in order for us to have new life. And God is going to work that miracle. And the transformation at Cana points us to the born-again experience. It points us to the metamorphosis that's got to occur in a human heart and a human life. God will clear the temple out. That's the next story. Then He's going to step in and move and take broken and busted people who are embarrassed about their past and all the crummy choices they've made, and He's going to change us. If we're willing to place our faith in Him and follow Him and repent of our sin and allow Him to do a work in our lives. This miracle is a portrait of you and of me. And that's why Paul says in Romans 12:2, he says, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. Just like we see here, be transformed. Metamorphosis, that's the Greek here. It's the caterpillar into the butterfly. It's this transformation that's going to start in the mind, and then you're going to understand how to follow after God. This is what he's getting at here. And this is what he wants for us. There's a new birth, a new start, a new life, transformation. And it only happens when you're humble. It only happens when we're lowly, because it tells us here that God opposes the proud, but gives grace to who? The humble. James 4. But he gives greater grace. Therefore it says, God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Watch what he says later on. Therefore, what? Humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and he will what? Exalt you, lift you up. We say we want to see miracles in our lives. We want to see transformation. We want to, experience life change. Humble. obedience. Faithful obedience. And God will move. I believe that the greatest miracle that we will see, apart from, I'm going to say, the resurrection, the incarnation, is the transformation of a human life. We're looking for signs and wonders today. You don't need somebody to walk across the lake. You don't need another Samson to come by and pick up a car and throw it across a parking lot. You want to see a miracle? Submit to God. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. Ask God to transform you. And He will move in ways that are miraculous. Debbie just shared a short testimony this morning before she sang. 42 years growing in the Lord. That's a miracle. Every one of us who has come to Christ has gone through a series of miracles. And God wants to continue to work those miracles in subtle ways, in profound ways, to bring us closer to Himself and transform us into the image of His Son. So this morning, as we start off, we have a problem. We're no different than the head waiter here who had a failure. And our failure is sin. And all of us have sinned and fallen short of God's glory. And the solution is found in Jesus Christ. In His death, His resurrection, and the transforming work that He wants to perform in your life if we are humble. Let's pray. Father, we come